Welcome to Talking New York Real Estate with Vince Rocco. Our show is all about the exciting world of real estate and in particular, how it relates to the luxury New York marketplace. But if you are not planning a real estate transaction in New York, we still have plenty of information you can use no matter where you are. Now, here's our show.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm Vince Rocco in New York, where the state of our industry can be selective. So let's get right to what everyone is talking about. New development has always been one of the most high-profile parts of the New York City housing market. The glass towers, the amenity packages, the bold architectural statements that have reshaped the skyline. But in 2026, the reality behind the development is a lot more complicated than the marketing brochures. Developers are facing higher interest rates, elevated construction costs, and tighter financing. But at the same time, buyers are more cautious and far more focused on value. Some projects are delivering into a very different market than where they began, while others are being delayed, redesigned, or shelved altogether. And yet demand for new turnkey product with modern systems and amenities hasn't disappeared. It's just become more selective. So today we're going to talk about and take a look at new development reality in New York City in 2026, what's selling, what's sitting, and how developers, buyers, and brokers are adjusting to a very different market cycle. And here on set with me today are Stephen Kligerman from Brown Harris Stevens and Peter Grabard from Grabard and Blumenfield Law. And they join me now to discuss. But first, let me welcome my listeners and viewers from across the United States and all around the globe. This is Talking New York Real Estate, so let's go behind the headlines and inside the state of our industry.
Hi, it's Stephen Bailey from Roadway Moving and Storage. Listening to Vince Rocco, you know the right partner makes all the difference. At Roadway, we deliver an experience your clients will love. For specialized services and white glove care, choose Roadway. Want to learn more? Email me at stephen@roadwaymoving.com or visit roadwaymoving.com.
All right, everybody, we are back. So we're going to talk today about new development, the reality of new development condominiums here in New York City in 2026. Now, I'm in this business 24 years, and I just calculated this morning because one of my favorite executives, Mr. Stephen Kligerman, the president of our Brown Harris Stevens division, is here, and I worked for him for years. 20 years ago, I started in your division.
That feels like yesterday.
I can't even. So, you go through whatever you go through in this life of real estate, but 20 years in new development, it's quite amazing. It's a fun thing to do. But, in the marketplace today, not only new development, resale, whether it's condo and co-op, everything is kind of up in the air and being questioned. It's a very weird market, my term. So, Steve, I do want to start with you. Let's be honest, though. Are some new development prices in New York still anchored in a market that existed years ago, or have developers, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in a bit, but have they kind of seen the light a little bit and adjusted here and there, or are we still back in the past?
Well, when you ask about, are some, there are so many different segmented markets within the marketplace itself. So if you look at what I'll call the ultra high end, it is setting new records every day.
Yeah.
Right. So, the ultra high end, the 1122 Madison Avenues, the 80 Clarksons of the world, the 50 West 66th Streets of the world and the like, 200 Amsterdam, they're setting new records because they're building product that is in high demand to ultra wealthy people who have a long-term view of New York, and who always want to make New York their home, or at least one of their numerous residences. And then you have what I'd like to say the middle market, because there really is no low end market, right? No. So you have the middle market, and in different neighborhoods in Manhattan, some neighborhoods have seen appreciation, and some neighborhoods are basically reasonably stagnant over the 10-year average. The interesting thing is, if you look at the market as a whole over the 10-year average, the market really doesn't move that much. But in those segments of the marketplace, there is a lot of movement. Are some projects stuck in years past, maybe in the post-COVID boom? Yes, there are projects out there that were built and conceptualized during COVID that there was a assumption that the market would continue to appreciate, and that market has basically been flat. We don't see that market pulling back. We just don't see it appreciating as much as the ultra high end. So areas like Hell's Kitchen, where you and I started, that marketplace has been a little bit flat over the years. Which frankly is a little bit amazing to me because I love the neighborhood. I know you love the neighborhood.
I do.
You do a tremendous amount of work in the neighborhood.
But don't you think, thank you, but don't you think though that pricing got a little like what I call top shelf in that neighborhood where, it started when you and I, were there 20 years ago, my God. It started wherever it started. But I think, we've topped out, especially in some of the buildings that I work in regularly there. They've sort of topped out. And I'm thinking, so going back to what you said about the super ultra luxury market doing well, and it's doing well on the resale side as well. But do you think the buyers, those who are kind of stalled these days, are more selective in where they're going or what they're buying? Or is it just they're kind of sitting back like on the resale side waiting for, those prices to, drop?
Right. I think buyers are more selective, but the problem is they also don't have a lot of choices.
Yeah. Well,
right. So at the ultra high end, they have some choices, although those apartments seem to be scooped up very, very quickly. But in the average market, in the middle market, there just aren't a lot of choices. So I think what you're seeing is buyers are visiting new developments. They like the product. They just don't have enough options to make a good decision. So they're sitting on the sideline a little bit longer. Plus they're waiting for things like interest rates to drop, which they have started to. I just saw a rate sheet come out yesterday with most of the rates in the somewhere between 5 1/8 and 5 3/4, which is, great to see. So
amazing.
It's very hard when a consumer doesn't have enough options. Sometimes they don't want to feel like they just acquiesced. And they just took what was there, so they're waiting for something new. The problem is there's not that much new coming.
Right. And we're going to talk about the inventory, but because again, on the new development side and on the resale side, the inventory, I believe, and we've said this from the start of the year, will be our biggest problem this year, not interest rates, not a few other things, but inventory, I think this year will be our biggest problem. Peter, so when you get a customer and they come to you and they tell you they're going to be buying new development, do they share with you any concern about pricing? Do they share with you any concern about, how long it may take to deliver? I mean, back in the day when I first started working for Steve, we sold off of floor plans. You went home and waited a year for the building to be done. I don't know that there's any buyer out there today that has that kind of patience to do that. First of all, to buy off a piece of paper, right? And you got to be really good at doing that because, you're really selling hard. You can't do that today. What are the concerns that buyers have when they come to you and say, okay, Peter, I'm going to get involved in this deal. What is your opinion?
Well, timing is always a concern for buyers. And in new development, timing is a key factor. Because construction is not an exact science. There are oftentimes delays beyond the developer's control.
Indeed.
And so one of the things I tell a buyer who is thinking about purchasing a new development in a building that has not yet closed its first unit is that they have to have a plan B in terms of their living situation.
I was going to get to that, but go ahead.
They have to have some flexibility in their current living situation because there are oftentimes delays with the Department of Buildings in getting a certificate of occupancy or with the Department of Finance in allocating the individual tax lots for each apartment. These things take time. These days, they take a little less time because there are fewer projects for those agencies to be juggling at the same time. But timing is certainly a consideration. And in terms of pricing, when I got into this business and new development was booming and there were a lot of buildings going up and people were buying off of floor plans and off
the heyday. I missed those days.
Off of paper. The pitch of these developers and therefore the attorneys was that, they'd be buying at the lowest price this apartment would ever be. Okay. Because every 2 months, another amendment to the offering plan was filed and the prices for the unsold apartments in the building would be increased based on, the market and how much demand there has been for the apartments. And so buyers felt good about the investment prospect of buying new construction because they felt as though they were getting in at the bottom. And if they held long enough, prices always go up in New York City. And so they're getting this brand new product at the lowest it will be. I'm not so sure that's the feeling anymore necessarily. There's a lack of that. Oh, well, this building's going up and they're selling out in record time. And so, they see stagnation in the market, and they're not so convinced anymore that the price they're getting is necessarily going to be, at least in the short term, the lowest price that they'll see for this apartment.
Right. And also, back then, let's take it back to 2005, let's say, right? The ratio of condominiums to co-ops was very, very low, right? We were at 80+% co-ops to condos. Now we're like 60-something% co-ops to condos. So Peter's right. People were buying off Schedule A because by the time they closed, they had made 20, 30, 40, sometimes 100% on their equity. So they were making money on the developer's back. Right now,
absolutely,
they're really buying more of a home than they are an investment. And that's a shift in the buyer's mentality. We had people flipping contracts.
Correct.
And then splitting the profit with the developer back then.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, right.
I was going to say, because that was like kind of a no-no with a lot of developments. They didn't want you to do that. But of course, if you're bringing them in on the split.
Right. And they're going to make money on it too. That's great. Now people are buying more a home.
Yeah.
Right.
I would agree with that. In continuing ed, and I talk about this every week, the classes that I teach new development condominium sales and then the condominium offering plan. And, we talk about a lot of things, with regard to new development. But, one of the things that I've always remember hearing when I was involved is that people want to live in a place that no one else ever lived in before.
Correct.
They want brand new. It's all about the amenities. Yes, we know that. But they want to live in a home, as you say, where no one's ever lived before. I'm the first one here. I want to make this my home. Look, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is, but they want to make it, their home. Steve, are there buildings delivering right now with a lot of unsold inventory? I mean, we talked through the years about a lot of unsold inventory, which means, units that aren't selling so quickly, stacking up out there, making it a little impossible for buyers to figure out where am I going first, right? Or are we quietly heading toward a soft reset in pricing overall?
Yeah. So in prep for that question, and thanks for sending it over, I took a look at two different matrices. I took a look at projects that have been on the market for greater than 12 months that have less than half their inventory sold. Okay. There are 40 buildings which total about 1,522 units that have been on the market for more than 12 months that still haven't accomplished 50% sold, which is not the end of the world. I mean, that would be a pretty high absorption rate, but you have to set a bar, right? But it's 40 buildings and 1,500 units. There are projects that have been on the market for more than 2 years that are less than 80% sold. There are 75 buildings with 2,145 units. So what this is showing us is that, listen, absorption started to slow when interest rates went down. There have been a number of economic, global matters also that have impacted consumer confidence over the last couple of years. But, in total, there are about 3,600 units out there that have been on the market for somewhere between a year and 2 years that still need to be absorbed. Now, some of those are in about 5 buildings, right? There are a handful of buildings that make up a lot of that inventory. I don't want to call them out. I don't want to out the buildings that are underperforming. We all know which ones they are. But literally, at least half of that inventory is in 5 buildings that I believe were aspirationally priced, maybe poorly conceived, either in neighborhoods that cannot support their pricing, or the building has some other issues, like it's a conversion and the windows are small, or it was just really overpriced compared to some other luxury product out there, or it's in a neighborhood that has poor transportation, or it was a building that sat vacant because of legal issues for a number of years and then came back to the market and is still trying to find its way. What we do find, though, is there are a handful of buildings that last year were in that category. They adjusted their prices and now they are absorbing. So what it proves out is once you find your pricing level, the market takes care of itself.
Well, Steve,
It does.
is a building that's not yet 80% sold after 2 years, is that considered problematic? Is that a failure for that building?
If it's a 50-unit building, maybe. If it's a 500-unit building, no, right? So not all are created equally. But you have to really take a look at what the absorption rate within the building is, not just what's left on the market. But in some instances, yes, it's an indication of either overpricing or just a product that was ill-conceived. And then sometimes you just kind of, it's the luck of the draw. Maybe when you started to conceive that project, the block was great, and all of a sudden something happened on that block. A building, there was a fire in a building, there was an abandoned building, a nightclub opened up. You never know what might happen, right? So, you plan for the best and you also plan for the worst, but there's always the unknown.
Very true. On that note, developers are facing all kind of higher borrowing costs, rising insurance, very high or increased construction cost. How does that work into, the overall pricing scheme out there? Because look, on our end, our energy costs are up, our insurance premiums are high, our common charges and taxes and whatever have gone up. Well, the developers have the same problem. How are they kind of working that into what the market can absorb from a pricing perspective? Not even taking into consideration yet, we'll talk about that after the break, about the common charges and the taxes.
Well, of course, listen, bottom line is developers and their investment partners are in business to make money, right? And because of the huge amount of risk that they take on, because you start a project today, you're not delivering it for 4 or 5 years sometimes.
Right.
If your crystal ball is better than mine, let me know, because I want to invest with you. You have to take everything into consideration. So, if cost of construction is up, which it is, if cost of insurance is up, which it is, okay, then the overall cost to produce that product is up. So the developer has a minimum number that they need to get to make it viable. So you do your best to project who that potential buyer is and what the competition is going to be at the time when that product comes to market, and what's missing from the marketplace. Where are the holes in the marketplace? What buyer needs aren't being met? And then you look to see if you can price that to that buyer demographic, for lack of a better word.
And is it true, because I've been reading articles that developers are now, because of those increased costs and the uncertainty, are leaning towards smaller, lower rise projects with not as many units and quicker turnaround times than the massive high-rise projects. Is that what you were seeing?
Maybe not lower rise, because views still do demand a premium, but definitely more boutique-y unit count. So, you might find a 30-story building that in the past, maybe that 30-story building would have been 120 apartments, and now it's 60. Because they're doing 2 units per floor, because they're catering to a higher price point, a buyer that is also less reliant on the current economy, right? They've had time to build wealth, or they have generational wealth. They're not as volatile, right? So that's why you see so much high end being built, because let's be factual here. People with money seem to always have money, right? People that work hard for a living, like you and me, Pete, we have to worry about what our budget is. So if you build to those that don't really have budgetary issues, you always have a marketplace.
Excellent.
But the problem is, because of that, in Manhattan, you're seeing less and less of that middle market inventory being produced, because it's so expensive now to build it. So let's say 10 years ago, I could sell that product at $1,650 a square foot if all went poor, and I'd still make money. That same developer today probably has to sell at $2,000 or $2,100 a foot to make money, because their cost of construction has gone up by 30, 40, 50%, maybe more. And their cost of capital is doubled.
Yeah. That's the concern.
Yeah.
All right, listen, we've got to take a quick break. This is Talking New York Real Estate on the More Network. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back.
The Everset provides full-service staging and furniture rental solutions in the New York area. For more information, please visit us at staging.theeverset.com or email us at staging@theeverset.com to request a free proposal.
All right, we are back. So, Peter, let me ask you from the legal side, are developers becoming more aggressive in contracts or timelines because their financing pressures are increasing or not? From your perspective, what do you see? What do you hear?
No, I haven't really seen that. You know, the typical sponsor deal contract really hasn't changed much in 20 years.
Yeah, it hasn't.
It's got the same cover your ass language. It's got the same, everything is skewed in favor of the developer. It's got the same flexibility on the developer side in terms of completion and zero flexibility on the purchaser side.
Section in the
right.
Plan.
So
Perfectly.
It's got all of that still, and it really hasn't changed.
Yeah.
And developers are under more pressure to complete a project and to close than they were because of the high carrying costs of carrying the project.
Well, that's
and so they tend these days to be actually more flexible in terms of contract negotiation and in terms of closing cost negotiation. These days.
Yeah.
Correct.
In the very beginning, it was like,
no.
It is what it is.
Yeah, well, there was a line out the door.
There was a line out the door. They didn't have to be.
If Pete's client walked away, there was someone behind them
Right.
willing to jump on that contract.
So they didn't have to be flexible in that regard. And in terms of price, they're still not flexible. They have constraints with their lenders.
Well, they're lenders, yeah.
Yeah. But what they are flexible with are incentives and closing costs.
Yeah.
And I told a story the last time I was on your podcast about a very affluent client of mine who is buying a $40 million condo in a Tribeca new construction development.
Yeah, I remember.
And went without an agent to the building and didn't know to negotiate anything. And so came to a price agreement. And when they then came to me and said, we're buying this apartment, we don't have an agent. I said, okay, well, did you negotiate?
Tip out there, make sure you work with an agent, especially a new development.
Did you negotiate anything in terms of closing costs?
Yeah.
And they said, no. And I'm like, okay, well, you understand that you're going to be required to pay the transfer taxes to the city and state of New York. Correct. And on a $40 million apartment, that's almost $700,000.
That's no small pocket change,
right?
Even for someone spending $40 million.
Exactly. So $700,000 just on closing costs that a seller is statutorily obligated to pay. It wasn't an easy pill to swallow. So we had to try and go back and renegotiate it. And they said no. They said
really?
we based our price on,
right.
On that.
Mm-hmm.
Had, my feeling is, had they gone in with the knowledge to attempt to negotiate that at the beginning, they probably would have been successful. As most of my buyers are these days, they're successful in getting the developers to pay the New York State and New York City transfer taxes. We're seeing some developers agree to pay the mansion tax. We're seeing, which is a buyer's transfer tax. We're seeing developers give concessions on common charges for 18 or 36 months even.
Correct.
We see them agreeing to pay the working capital fund contribution, agreeing to pay their own attorney's fee. Imagine that.
None of these things existed.
Correct. These were all things that customarily buyers were expected to absorb, all under the guise of, look, you're getting this apartment at the lowest it will ever be, right? With something I mentioned earlier. And, that feeling, it doesn't really exist out there so much anymore. It's, yes, we're buying a home and we want the right price for it. And we don't really want to pay closing costs. We don't want to be treated differently than if we were buying a resale apartment.
That $40 million, just remind me because I don't remember, was that a cash deal or was that
It's a cash deal.
Deal.
I mean.
Well, so one would say if somebody can, spend $40 million on an apartment, they weren't thinking about what can I negotiate or what can I, everybody wants a deal. But when you look at the particulars like you just outlined.
True.
They could have saved themselves probably $1 million.
Yeah. True. Exactly. And $1 million, I don't care how much money you have.
Exactly.
It's a big savings.
It's a lot of money. And a little bit of shame on that sales team for at least not informing the buyer that there are additional costs to closing.
Right.
Agreed.
I
Sales team doesn't make any less money if they're working with
no,
a
and
co-broker.
I see this all the time. We have our brokers, and even brokers from other companies call me, asking me about, negotiations with new development and, what are the costs? And I'm not sure. I've never sold new development before. I always tell them, well, the on-site sales team should be able to give you a closing cost sheet so that you know what you're doing. But even that buyer, because they didn't walk in with a broker like Vince, didn't even know to ask for that. So that's
kind of
a shame.
strange because we used to do that all the time.
Of course,
so right. We used to do it all the time because they need to know these things.
Yeah.
Back in the day when they had to pay everything, they wanted to know what they were paying.
Yeah.
Then it became negotiable. My last couple of projects were all negotiable, and developers had to swallow hard to understand they have to pay mansion tax and transfer tax, their own attorney fee, as you say. Hey, this adds up on their end too.
Yeah, and I have a lot of buyers. A lot of times we get asked for the sponsor to cover the resident manager's unit because that's a big number out of pocket.
Yeah.
That's a very big number.
And especially for someone like if they're buying, not that a $2 million apartment isn't, a big purchase, but, if they're buying a $2 million apartment versus a $40 million apartment, now that buyer at that $2 million apartment is paying $30,000 cash out of pocket for the resident manager's unit contribution. For that $2 million buyer, that's a lot of money out of pocket because they're already going $400,000, $500,000 out of pocket for their down payment, right? And now it's another $30,000, and now it's it all adds up. So I see the resident manager's unit getting negotiated a lot,
right? Or in Battery Park City when there was construction boom there. You had to pay the Battery Park City security fund, right? So that was like a security deposit that the first purchaser had to pay to secure that the condominium would pay its ground rent to the Battery Park City Authority.
On top of a land lease,
Right. But it was a security deposit that you didn't get back when you sold your apartment.
Right.
And so you would have to then either negotiate with your buyer to reimburse you for it, which never happened, or that was money you never saw back.
It's a sunk cost.
Right.
Yeah. That's quite the neighborhood anyway from a lot of perspectives. But as I mentioned before, when I'm teaching, we spend a lot of time on the special risk section. And now that I have my attorney here, give me an idea or an understanding, because when I read these components of the special risk, it really is all in favor of the developer. Okay, well, we're not here to bash developers. Okay, I made a living working with developers. I love them dearly, but they really are protected, as you mentioned before, almost across the board. I don't take or make warranty about this. I don't do this if I can't finish the building, if I don't get financing, and I know from being in new development for many, many years, attorneys would call me and say, Vince, by the way, and I'm like, hey, listen, it's an offering plan, no different than the last one you read, okay? What is it about that makes attorneys get really anxious?
Well, I mean, we're used to it. Those of us who do this now, we're used to the special risks section of the offering plan. We're used to the one-sided nature.
Right.
And so we do the best we can to balance it out with some rider clauses that we like to put in. I like to add in a clause that, my buyer has an automatic right of adjournment penalty-free for up to 30 days if needed. Most developers will give you 15 days. Some will give you 30 days.
Right.
And other things, that bells and whistles that I add in, but it doesn't. The overall tenor of the contract and offering plan is always going to skew in favor of the developer. Some things that I think we're doing a disservice to our clients with, we don't explain up front about the finished product. That I think is very important because from an anecdotal standpoint, I have a client that closed on Hudson Yards apartment late last year, and there was a punch list, right? And so they're having a situation where the kitchen cabinets, along the edges of some of the kitchen cabinets, the finish has chipped a little bit or whatnot, or there's little nicks in the along the edge, and they're fighting, with the developer tooth and nail. They want new cabinets, right? They don't want just that little bit of filler or that little bit of furniture pencil or pen to come in and fix it. I bought something new. I spent $4 million new. Well, true, but new when it comes to construction doesn't mean perfect, right? It means new. But it doesn't mean absolute perfection down to the littlest thing. So the offering plan in the special risks section, has language that says, the floors are going to separate during cold months and then come back together we're not fixing that. Or, we'll do our best to touch up little things, but that doesn't mean we have to replace the entire kitchen because a couple of the cabinets have little chips on them. And I think if you don't prepare your buyers for that in advance, then they wind up disappointed when little things like that go wrong, even for the most reputable builder. Little things like that go wrong.
But you see, I totally
it.
agree with that. But I blame the agents on that because they don't really understand what new development is really all about.
Yeah.
It's a transaction. Okay, we'll do it. And then, I've been on many walkthroughs where agents, I've wanted to toss them out the room and said, I'll finish this without you. They say things and do things and on the floor, and I can't tell you, examples, picking out scratches, whatever. So I get that. But from an attorney perspective, I just wanted to understand what really is the rub here, because it's not difficult, and developers don't do these things on purpose. They want to sell apartments, they want to help you out, and they want to do a good job.
Right.
And
Vince, when the broker brings like a marble and puts it on the floor and it rolls a little bit, or they bring a T-square,
the blue tape on the floor.
Yeah, well, blue tape everywhere. So but to that point, they still are buying something new, and most, I would say, most reputable developers, and the ones that we choose to work with, because we do choose to work with our developers as much as they choose to work with us, will do their best to accommodate that buyer.
They do their best.
But there are some developers out there that I would say a little bit newer to the marketplace that don't quite have the same pride in their workmanship as some others.
Absolutely.
And I think it also depends on your price point. Your $40 million deal, guarantee when they walk into that apartment, if those kitchen cabinets aren't perfect, they're not going to accept it, right? If there's a slight scratch in the marble or whatever the countertop might be made of, they're not going to accept that. But a developer that has a track record of producing a quality product, that's why they're successful. Right. And yes,
and repeat.
Yes, the Zeckendorfs are, all disclaimer, co-chairman of Brown Harris Stevens. So, I have an affinity to them, but I know that when you walk into a Zeckendorf development, they've already punched that unit out.
Yeah.
They do not expect you to find much to complain about, because they have taken pride in that workmanship to make sure that it's right. And they bring a separate crew in to punch those units out before the buyer walks through it. And part of the problem is, Pete, I don't know if you see this, so do you negotiate pre-closing visits for architect, designer?
We try, but in most cases that's rejected.
Right, but when they do go, and the reason why the developer rejects them is because if you walk into that place and it's not finished, you're going to send a punch list that's 1,000 items long, and the developer's going to be like, I'm not even looking at it. And then it creates animosity. You want that buyer to walk in for the first time after they've entered into contract and be happy with their home and find very little wrong with it. And I think some developers, because they try to accommodate buyers too much, end up causing problems for themselves, because the buyer walks in and, there was a flood on the apartment above, it happens, and the kitchen is destroyed. Don't worry, we're going to replace the kitchen. But now they're freaking out. They call you. You have to call the sponsor's attorney, and everyone's got to, deal with it. So it matters who your developer is. That's the bottom line. And that's why certain developers in our industry have been so successful, and then some others have come and gone.
And success equals, in this business, repeat. Right?
That's right.
They come back with another one. They come back with, and you've certainly seen that, right? I have.
Yeah.
So would you say, after everything we've talked about so far, that buyers are still assuming that new development is a safe buy for them, that it's a safe, they want it to be their home over anything else, but do they really feel like it's a safe environment for them, or a comfortable purchase? As I tell buyers all the time, whether it's new development or resale, if the first night you sleep in your new apartment, you put your head on the pillow and say, hey, I made a good deal. I did a good thing. Yeah. I'm comfortable with this, this, and this. I'm good.
I think most buyers are happy with their decision. I think they feel security because the building is new. There are warranties on almost everything. They know they're not going to get wild assessments for the next 5 or 10 years. So, that alone gives you peace of mind and helps you sleep well at night, right? Big. Because if you're buying into an older building, which, by the way, a lot of older buildings are perfectly well maintained and properly, managed, but you don't know next year what might come up in an older building.
Yeah.
In a newer building, you know that your roof is guaranteed for 20 or 25 years. You know that your windows are guaranteed for 5 or 10 years. You know that all your systems are new. You also know that you're getting the latest technology. You're getting the newest of everything. So you have peace of mind for probably, the average New Yorker stays in their home, 7, 8 years?
Yeah.
For the length of time that you're going to be living there, you should be worry-free.
Correct. And it's predictable carrying costs that give buyers of new developments comfort.
Right.
They know things aren't going to change that much on a monthly expenditure basis for several years.
So, again, along the lines of being comfortable and buying a home that they can feel good about for all the reasons that Steve just mentioned, you see all the fine print and you see all the, the contractual stuff that buyers may not understand. Is there anything in particular that you want your buyers to really focus on and pay attention to more than others? Or is it just like, hey,
when it comes to new development?
When it comes to new development.
Yeah, there are certain things that I point out to my new development buyers, some of which I've already mentioned, which is, the finished product, but also size of the apartment. So size of the apartment is something that has come back to burn certain buyers in the ass throughout my career.
You mean from a square footage
From
perspective?
a square footage perspective. Developers measure the size of apartments as a square box from outer facade to outer facade, okay? So when they tell you an apartment is 2,500 square feet or 1,800 square feet, that includes non-usable square feet, okay? That includes interior columns, it includes closets, it includes everything, right? It's measured just as in an empty box.
Right, so it's not the carpetable area.
It's not the carpetable area. It's not the area that you can walk through. It actually includes the space between the drywall and the outer facade of the building where all the plumbing risers go and electrical wiring goes.
Someone's got to pay for it.
Yeah.
Correct. Right. So when you go to sell that apartment, right, and you say the apartment is 1,800 square feet because that's what my offering plan says, and then the buyer comes in and the buyer's appraiser comes in or the buyer's architect comes in to take measurements and they measure the actual usable square feet and they say, well, wait a minute, this apartment is actually 400 square feet less than what I was told it was, and as a result, I can't sell it for the same price or the same price per square foot nets me less. They have to be prepared for that because as long as you're comparing apples to apples, you don't have a problem. As long as you can point to the offering plan and say, look, as an agent listing an apartment for resale and say, I know agents don't like to mention square feet because it's not like they're physically measuring the apartments. But as long as they have some documentation to be able to point to and say, the offering plan says this apartment is 1,800 square feet, so I'm using that as my basis, then you don't have a problem.
Yeah, right. I have a lot of opinion on square footage. And honestly, I mean, I'm not disagreeing with what you say, but in all the years that I've sold new development, I probably can think of one incident where the square footage or the size of the apartment, as you referenced, became an issue. Honestly, people are obsessed with the numbers, but it wasn't taken to me per se, but I know that it is an issue and going along. And,
you also have to take a look at a new construction versus a conversion.
Well, we're
because in a conversion, a pre-war conversion, you could have 2-foot thick walls in an old pre-war building.
Right.
And what people have to understand, and how I've always explained it and how we've discussed it in the past, Vince, is if you were buying a single family home in the burbs, you're buying everything. You're buying it to the outside walls. You're buying the basement. You're buying the attic. You're buying it all.
And that's why nobody talks about square footage
So
in the
why is
suburbs.
it any different in condo sales? In condo sales, as Pete said, you're buying to the outside fascia of the building and halfway in between any demising walls because your neighbor is paying for the other half of the demising wall, right? So you're buying the corridors, you're buying the lobby, you're buying the gym, you're buying it all. Now, all of that isn't factored into the square footage of the apartment.
Well, you get a percentage of the common
but you
areas.
get a percentage of common interest, which goes to your common charges. So you're buying the whole package.
Yeah.
the developer's building the whole package and he has to get paid back for the whole package.
Yeah.
Right.
So, the bigger issue I see, Pete, is when buyers buy ground floor apartments with sub-level space. And then when they go to try to resell it, because they have now taken that 1-bedroom duplex, let's say, like we had at 505, right? And we called it a 1-bedroom because that's legally what it was.
You're right.
Buyer walks in, they close, they take that downstairs space and they make it a 2nd bedroom.
Right.
Now they want to list it with you as a resale as a 2-bedroom.
Right.
It's not a 2-bedroom.
Right,
It never legally was a 2-bedroom.
Or the home office that the developer creates because it doesn't have a window. It only has a lot line window.
We had that.
Lot line windows are
And then
also a factor that I point out to my buyers
lot line
that are in
windows are
the special
important.
risk section.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Like 96 and Broadway had all those lot line windows, and it was weird because they weren't kind of noted on the floor plan so well as lot line windows. So, but a good attorney like Peter is going to pick it up. Also, a good attorney like Peter who works with developers a lot, works with offering plans and new construction a lot, will hopefully get that offering plan even before they've done their first deal so that they can look it over. Like we will have lists of lawyers who we know understand new development.
Right.
And we will send them the offering plan so that by the time the buyer comes to ask them questions, they've already taken a look at it. So they can diffuse any concerns, but they can address concerns as well.
It's so funny you mentioned lot line windows, and I go back to sometimes I think it's more of an agent problem. When I'm talking about this stuff in class and mention lot line windows, agents look at me
like, what?
Huh? What does that mean?
Yeah.
Maybe we should explain to your audience what a lot line
hold on a minute.
window is.
But my point is, okay, so you're selling new development and you're responsible to make sure that they're comfortable, you and the attorney, with the special risk, and you don't know what a lot line window is. What if they say to you, what does this mean? And you say, huh?
Yeah, well, you should know. So a lot line window is a window that is smaller than a legally regulated window.
Yeah.
And the reason it is because it sits on the side of the building that abuts the property tax line. Mm-hmm. And it accounts for the fact that there may come a time in the future where the owner of the neighboring property builds of a certain height that it's too close to your facade. And as a result, for security purposes, that window has to be sealed.
Yes.
And it has to be sealed and blocked out at the unit owner's expense. The condominium does not take on that expense. And so now that's a room that had a window, albeit a small window, that will now have no window, right? And so it can't be used as a legal bedroom. It can't be used as a legally habitable space at all. And so it's an important factor to point out to buyers if that particular line of apartments has lot line windows.
Yeah. All right, we've got to take a quick break. We'll be right back with our last block after these messages. This is Talking New York Real Estate on the More Network. Don't go anywhere.
This podcast is supported by the More Network, powered by Brown Harris Stevens. Real estate touches every aspect of our lives, from design and architecture to investing and the economy. Now there's a way to get all your real estate information in one place. The More Network. With more than 20 podcast and webcast series, the Mastery of Real Estate Network is powered by Brown Harris Stevens, one of the country's most distinguished brokerages. Discover advice from notable entrepreneurs, compelling topics, and access to top global real estate experts. Subscribe to their YouTube and Apple podcast channels by visiting getmorenetwork.com.
Steve, with construction slowing and financing tightening, are we setting ourselves up for a housing shortage over the next few years, or will demand cool enough and kind of balance things out? Your opinion.
So in Manhattan, the current supply of units, new construction units, is set at about 3,400 new construction units that are current supply. At the current rate of absorption, that's about a 29-month supply, which is about 2.5 years, which is pretty low. The average is about 4 years of supply. In the pipeline, coming behind that is another about 30 months of supply. So in total, we're looking at about 60 months of supply, which is 5 years, but it's a rolling supply. So what we are seeing is supply every year is dwindling. We're selling about 1.3 units for every 1 unit that is supplied. So we're reducing by about a third every year the amount of supply out there. We're projecting right now that if the current pipeline of new development doesn't increase dramatically over the next 12 to 24 months, that within the next 4 years, we're almost going to have no new supply of new condominiums in New York City. And Brooklyn isn't in any better shape. So I believe that because of that supply and demand matrix, we will start to see greater appreciation in new development going forward because there's so little coming behind us. And we have a building that's about to get approved. We're in a CPS 1 right now on the Upper West Side on Aviation and Amsterdam that literally has no competition. The only other building in the area that has any supply is the Henry, and they're almost sold out. So there's nothing really new coming on the Upper West Side. Now, if you look at Lincoln Square, Extel's building a massive development there, and there's another proposed development in the area, but that's really it. Then the Upper East Side, which has seen a boom in new construction over the last 7 or 8 years, where there was no new construction, 15 years ago. No. That's starting to slow down too, as far as supply. So we're predicting by 2030, we believe that the new development market is going to see tremendous appreciation as less and less supply comes to
I
market.
agree with you on the Upper West Side. I live on the Upper West Side, and for a while there were 4 or 5 different projects going on there. But they also, pretty quickly over time, we got hit with COVID, so that kind of slowed a couple of them down. But it's not like the Upper East Side where we can say, oh my God, overbuilt, but still desirable. On that level, though, New York is one of the hardest and most expensive places in the world to build housing. Do you think at any point, though, Steve, that developers will kind of just say, you know what, it's becoming too expensive, way too much, and is it really worth it anymore? Based on what you just said, very positively, but do they kind of rumble in their mind thinking, well, I don't know, is this really worth it anymore?
So what's
my level of profit?
Right. So we were getting there, and then the City of Yes occurred. And the City of Yes has really been a game changer for developers because what it's done is it's increased their ability to increase the FAR on their site. So, let's say that they had a site that could have been 50,000 square feet. Maybe now it's 60 or 70,000 square feet. So you're getting bonus square footage without paying for it. The City of Yes also allowed the transfer of development rights from historic buildings. Instead of having to be on the same block, now they can be basically almost within an 8-block radius because it could be across the street, it could be down the street, it could be across the avenue from your block. So the ability for historic buildings, landmark buildings, religious institutions to now transfer their development rights further away has created the opportunity for developers to lower their basis so that they actually can build more efficient buildings based upon a price per square foot. So the city is making a lot of strides to make it easier for developers to maintain their presence here in New York. The biggest problem I think we're going to have in the future is there just isn't that much developable land left on the island of Manhattan.
Well, that's
okay.
I was going to ask you about that.
That's a big problem. Yeah. But a lot of developers that started to look outside of New York. I mean, I had clients, that looking out in Florida, South Carolina, Georgia, even Connecticut. They're now looking back in New York because with the ability to lower their total basis. Let's say they buy the lot itself for $400 a square foot, but they can buy another 1/3 of that buildable area for $150, $250 a square foot, more like $250. Now they can bring their average price per square foot of their construction or their acquisition down by $50 a foot. That's a big difference.
Talking about that and talking about, it leads me to wonder, we talk about brand new, ground up, we talk about conversions, and to your comment that there's not a lot of buildable land or anything anywhere. How is the conversion market doing? I mean, for the longest time, we were talking about office to residential conversions, on and on and on and on, and then it slowed down.
Well, the office market's picked up too, which is great for New York City.
Yeah.
But what about conversions in general, Steve? I mean, like you mentioned before, the old pre-war buildings converting to, whatever.
Right. Well, I mean, Pete will tell you, now, the laws back in 2019 when they changed the rent laws, changed the opportunity for landlords to convert their buildings, because in the past you needed to sell 15% of the units, period, to anybody to declare an offering plan effective. Now in an occupied building, you need to sell 51% of those same units to the tenants in occupancy, or if you have a fully market rate building, you have to completely vacate the building and then convert it, and the cost to completely vacate a building, unless you own it for very, very little, is most likely prohibitive, which is why the state implemented these new laws. But what that has also done is that has, again, decreased the supply, which eventually is going to increase pricing for people. It's also taken an opportunity away, because a lot of these folks who lived in these buildings that were being converted either were being bought out and making a nice amount of money, and maybe they were in a position where they needed to move to a warmer location, let's say, or they were being offered insider pricing and they were able to buy their apartment at a reasonable price and then sell it later at a great profit. So we're not seeing any conversions really anymore because of the change in the law. On the commercial to rental or condominium side, we've seen some conversions, but as I said, the office market has come back reasonably strongly. And office buildings don't easily convert to residential. Their systems are different, their windows are different, their efficiencies are different, and a lot of office landlords realize at the end of the day that the cost to convert the building isn't worth it. They may as well just adjust their rents a little bit and fight, live to fight another day. And some of the ones that are being converted are massive, and most of those are being converted into rentals because of the efficiencies, where in the rentals they can get away with home offices and interior rooms, and everybody knows, that people are going to have their roommates and they're going to do things that they shouldn't do. But we're in Manhattan and these things happen.
And, we used to, I can remember a time, and it wasn't that long ago, but maybe it was now, I don't know, where I was doing a ton of deals in brownstone conversions to condominium, where you had 4 or 5 story brownstone conversions, where a family developer would come in, buy the building, pay people to leave, and then rehab the apartments in it, or create 6 units when there were previously 4 or whatever it was, and people were snatching those up, all over Brooklyn, Bed-Stuy, everywhere.
Absolutely, in Brooklyn for sure.
People were snatching up those condos. We don't see many of those anymore. Those players,
Those players have unfortunately learned their lesson, because a lot of those players weren't professional developers.
No, they were not.
And they didn't know how to manage construction, and they ended up getting in trouble. Also, apropos to some things that are being talked about in Washington right now, institutional buyers were buying up hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these buildings a year because they don't comply to certain building codes, like ADA. If you have a walk-up building, you don't have to comply to the ADA laws, right? So all of a sudden, you can create smaller, tighter apartments where 3 people could share them more easily, because you don't have to worry that the bathroom has a 5-foot turning radius. Correct. You don't have to worry that the hallway has a 5-foot turning radius. So institutions,
you don't have ramps,
you don't have, exactly. So institutions were buying up a lot of those buildings that typically would have been developed by, as my good friend Fred Peters used to say years ago, dentists from Long Island.
That would be Fred Peters. Yeah, absolutely. Unbelievable. Where you see a lot of deals on both the resale and the new dev side. Where are more your new development stuff coming from? Any particular neighborhood? Brooklyn, Manhattan, uptown, downtown?
Brooklyn for sure. DeKalb Avenue, places like that. Hudson Yards.
Still.
With the straggling units that are left. But Brooklyn, I would say, mostly is where Long Island City. Some on the Upper East Side. The buildings are going up. I live on the Upper East Side, and almost on every block there's something new going up on 3rd Avenue or Lexington.
That's why I was excited on the Upper West Side where I live, when all those buildings were going up, and like finally, we're getting some new inventory here.
Right.
Everything is older for the most part. Where are you seeing, Steve, from your vantage point? What neighborhoods are? What boroughs are moving faster than others?
Well, I mean, Brooklyn's moving incredibly fast, as Pete said. So, like, if you look at 2026, 2027, 2028, total supply right now in Brooklyn is about 1,400 new development condominium units.
Wow.
We see that dropping to 653 by 2028. Okay, so Brooklyn, unless it's priced outrageously out of the market, if you build it, they will come and they will buy it. So Brooklyn has done very, very well, particularly Western Brooklyn, obviously Brooklyn Heights, Park Slope, Cobble Hill, the likes, downtown Brooklyn, Williamsburg, Fort Greene. That just goes on there's really no neighborhood, I would say, that isn't seeing reasonable absorption. As I said, I think Hell's Kitchen's been a little bit of a laggard lately, but I do think that's going to change. The Upper West Side, there's just no inventory.
No.
And the Upper East Side, Mickey Naftali has basically changed the entire
Bought the Upper West East Side,
and crushed it. But most of that inventory is being absorbed as well. Where we're not seeing as much condo activity now is like the financial district, because there's a lot of rental conversions going on there. But I do think that those rental conversions are going to lead into people who find that they really like living in the financial district because it's so convenient to get to anywhere else in the city. And eventually those renters will become buyers. So I think in the future, you will see some condominium development in the financial district because of that.
Quick question, Naftali, we mentioned him. What's the key to his success? Because he's enormously successful, and justifiably so.
Mickey's a great visionary, first of all. He sees an opportunity, and he's not scared to go for it.
Right.
He works with top architects and designers like Robert A.M. Stern. He's got a very competent, capable group of people that work with him, and he's also not scared to take a little bit of a risk because he's been in New York City long enough to see the peaks and valleys and how the trends change. He typically has an attention to detail, which purchasers appreciate.
His buildings are pretty.
His buildings are beautiful. He works with great architects and designers.
Stern, one of them. I mean, he's incredible. What he does and delivers is amazing. All right, last question. Looking ahead 5 years, will we look back at 2026, okay, and say it was very difficult, new development was challenging, or will we at some point this year reset, which I believe we will do, and ultimately look back 5 years and say, okay, 2026 kind of started us on that path or that momentum again to do well?
Well, I mean, with
everything we've said, on both sides.
That's what I'm saying. Based on Steve's wonderful statistics, I think we'll probably look back to 2026 as the glory days in terms of new construction, in terms of things going up. I mean, from a price perspective, it'll be nice for the developers, but in terms of what's on the horizon, who knows? It sounds like we're trending in fewer and fewer projects.
Yeah. I think we'll look back on 2026 and say that developers produced and delivered incredible product that got absorbed.
Yeah.
You've got like I said, the 1122 Madisons, the 80 Clarksons of the world. We're about to bring 200 West 88th Street to market, which is an incredible project with Robert A.M. Stern. I think you're going to look back at this marketplace, 140 Jane Street, and say, that developers saw a demand and they took the risk to provide product that the city's never before seen, and buyers appreciated it. And I think that is a jumping off point to even greater high-end new development, which I do believe will lead into more of the middle market also being filled with great product.
140 Jane is
insane.
Is that 40 million apartment?
There you go. What a great place. Yeah. But I'm bullish on the new development market. Also, being involved for so many years, and I agree with that. I think we're going to see better things coming our way. If we look back 4 or 5 years from now, but 2026, I believe, is going to start. I don't know, some kind of a resurgence. I mean, I just feel that.
I also feel like with interest rates dropping a little bit, people are
that's
going
what
to
I was
take
about to
advantage
say,
of that,
yeah.
and they're going to jump into that because, again,
And that's one major reason.
Yeah, you only know the market that you're in.
Correct.
And I think that people have been sitting on the sidelines waiting for rates to get like under 5.5, and now that they are, I think you're going to see a lot of people come off the sidelines.
And through the years, I've seen hundreds and hundreds and talked to hundreds and hundreds of new development buyers. And I know what they want, and I know what they look for, and I know what really, kind of motivates them. And it's still new development.
Well, you have,
so they're out there. So we got to just kind of, get that inventory up.
Because you have what I see the buyer. You have that buyer that wants the pre-war character, old character.
Well, that's
and sometimes, and then you have the new development buyer. They want everything new,
night and day.
What suffers is the post-war 60s and 70s type of resale buildings, cookie cutter apartments. So I think the market for new development and the market for the historic charm will always be there.
Well, okay, we are out of time. We're coming back with my final thoughts right after these messages.
Hi, it's Stephen Bailey from Roadway Moving and Storage. Listening to Vince Rocco, you know the right partner makes all the difference. At Roadway, we deliver an experience your clients will love. For specialized services and white glove care, choose Roadway. Want to learn more? Email me at steven@roadwaymoving.com or visit roadwaymoving.com.
Okay, everybody, we are back with my final thoughts. So New York City's new development market in 2026 is a mix of opportunity, caution, and hard lessons. Prices, incentives, and timelines are shifting. Buyers are more selective, and developers are navigating higher cost and tighter financing. What's delivering, what's delayed, and what's still on the drawing board tells a bigger story about the future of the city's skyline and the smart strategies buyers and brokers need today. The takeaway: knowledge and timing matter more than ever. Whether you're looking to buy, sell, or simply understand the market, the key is asking the right questions, understanding risk, and staying flexible. For anyone in New York watching this space, one thing is clear: new development isn't about luxury towers, rather. It's glossy brochures. It's about real numbers, real risk, and real opportunities. And that's it for this episode of Talking New York Real Estate. We should always remember, it's not about grand promises or overnight change. It's about intention, choosing clarity over noise, growth over comfort, and being deliberate with how we show up every day. Thank you for listening, for watching, and for being a part of the conversation. If this episode brought value, share it, subscribe, and keep asking the questions that matter. Until next time, stay informed, stay intentional, and keep finding your space. You can follow me on Facebook, on Threads, Instagram, LinkedIn, Blue Sky, Substack, or TikTok at Vince Rocco. And Einstein once said, compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it. He who doesn't pays it. And from all of us here at Talking New York Real Estate and the More Network, to all of you all around the world, thanks for spending a part of your day with us. I'm truly grateful. Keep thinking the good thoughts, and I will see you next time. Goodbye, everybody.